Okay, guys, so let's do this. So, I'm really happy to be here, and I hope that you guys enjoyed the Digital Dragons. We will be talking about the quests in Witcher 3. My name is Paweł, Sasko, and I'm a lead technical quest designer working in CD Projekt Red. Currently, I'm working on Cyberpunk. I've been working on Witcher 3 and both expansions, and this is what I will be talking to you about. Few things first. So I work in the industry since 12 years. There are some games that I made, some games that were deleted while they were in productions, and it was very sad. At the end, they're probably the most important ones and the ones that I'm really the most proud about, which is The Witcher 3 and the expansions. Now, I will talk to you about 5 different quests that I've been working on, and I picked those quests because they all have significant elements that I wanted to highlight. And those quests will be the family matters. So this is a quest about Bloody Baron. The next one is The Last Wish, the romance story with Yennefer. The third one is the Battle of Kaer Morhen. The first one from the expansion, which is Dead Man's Party, so the wedding quest. And the last one, La Cage aux Fous, or this is at least how my French friends taught me to spell it. Quest about the Spoon Collector from the second expansion. So you might have already catch the fact that I'm going to spoil the shit out of some things. So I'm really, really sorry about it. And this is the last time and the last chance to leave, okay? I will try to stick only to the most important things for the quest so that you can guys understand our methods and so on. But you know, it's really difficult to talk to the story without telling you the story. Now, let's switch to the first quest. So I hope that everybody left who was supposed to. The family matters. I added the Polish titles. Some of you may have played it in Polish or other languages. I actually encourage you to play it in Japanese with Polish subtitles. Japanese Geralt is amazing. He's this shogun type of a character, so I hope you'll like it. So when we started designing the Family Matters quest, we knew a few things. First thing was we really want to delve into the Slavic culture and Slavic motives, and this is really what we wanted to sell there. Second thing is we wanted to characterize No Man's Land. That was one of our really big areas that we knew that player will be wandering through. And this quest was happening kinda at the very beginning of one of these areas. So that was important for us so that we'll show the correct motives and elements of the story. The next thing is the parallel between fathers. So we had this father figure, which was Geralt, and we had the other father figure, which was Baron. And they were completely different. However, they had some things that were in common for them. And this is what we wanted to dive into here. And our writer, Karolina Stachyra, did an amazing job in dialogues, highlighting all those things. Next thing is the horror of the war in the personal story. We wanted to focus on Baron. Because basically, at least in our opinion, the strongest stories are the stories told through characters. And this character in this story was Baron. And the next thing was the shades of our fatherly love. As I mentioned, Geralt and Baron, they loved their daughters in a completely different ways. That was something that we wanted to show. And the last thing is, we wanted to do this in a mature way. That was extremely important for us, and it is always actually in all our quests. Now, there is something that I need to talk to you about before we'll actually start analyzing the story. I need to show you one of our methods that we use to analyze the story, which is called a pacing graph. So the pacing graph normally is a graph showing basically the curve between tension and time. So this is fairly standard method that you may see in the movies and in some games, especially games focused on the story. Basically, that kind of graph shows you the events that are happening along the time and what is the tension of the viewer, of your audience, of the player actually playing the quest. So that is the pacing graph. This is how we kind of normally use that, right? Obviously, we don't really use it for every quest to analyze it like this. This is used for most of the main quests. This is used also very often for the more important quests. And the pacing graph shows you all the events that are happening at the beginning of the timeline and then when they are rising and going down. And this has a tremendous value, and it's extremely important for the designer. But what's more important are actually the moments when the story goes down and when the story goes up. So the moments when the tension is the lowest and when the tension is the highest. Those are the most important elements and moments for the designer, at least usually. When you want to show the important stuff in your story, when there is something interesting and something that you want the player to memorize. So this is our pacing graph. And I will be using this method throughout the whole talk. And the red borders marks you the most important moments that I just mentioned. So let's go back to the Baron. I will analyze with you a piece of the quest now, basically going through the story of the quest, to basically show you the graph, to basically explain all the tricks that we used. One thing that I wanted to highlight, basically, before I even start talking about it, that the whole idea for the quest starts off always for us in our writers team, right? At that time, Marcin Blacha was the lead writer of the Witcher 3 writers, and he was one that sparked the whole conversation about this quest. He was the one that gave the initial idea. Now, let's delve into the actual things that are happening. So this is a moment when player is going on horse towards the stables, and the stables are burning. Next thing that we see the fire on the horizon, and one thing that we can do, reaching there, player actually can go into the stables and play the sequence in the stables, but he can also confront Baron right away. There's, of course, multiple ways to do this. I won't delve into that because that's not really that important at that point. And then there's this interesting moment that happened when Geralt beats the shit out of him, puts his face into the crib, the horse crib, basically, and afterwards, they have this very important dialogue, the one that happens in the manor when they sit both by the fire, and Baron confesses some things that happen in his life. And then, at that moment, they both decide, okay, to take the trip, to actually move on and try to find the botchling and dig him out and do the ritual. So when we'll put all on the pacing graph that I already shown you, it will look kind of like that. At first, we have the fire on the horizon, right? Then the tension rises because the stables are burning. If we get into the building that is burning, we see that, the fire is over us. We can, throw art, to break shit, basically around us. Actually, we can help the stableman that is there. But it all somehow leads to fighting the Baron. And this is kind of a peak at the story at this moment. Then there's a moment when we are, as a player, we are rewarded. Because we defeated him, and his face basically lands into the crib. And then there is a moment of confession. Actually, the tension is released at that moment. And we both sit together and discuss all the things that happen in his story. But then the tension slowly starts going up, because we are told that there is a new objective for us, right? We're going through the journey to dig out the botchling. So now we need to go back to our pacing graph to tell you, I need to tell you about something else. So this is the analysis that we would do if The Witcher would be a movie, right? Netflix. But The Witcher is a game, right? And the games have some specific elements to it. Basically, they are interactive. So in the pacing graph, we actually mark the type of the content that is actually happening in the story. Because basically, player is differently perceiving the scene, he's perceiving differently the combat, and completely differently non-combat gameplay elements. And for us, those are three types of things that are kind of happening one after another. So now when you know all of that, let's look at our sequence when we actually have the elements added. You will see that there is a certain rhythm to the whole events happening. And this is something that we call a pacing. So this is basically a rhythm of narration happening. And if you create your own story and you structure everything, when you have basically too much of the blue thing, so basically the scenes are too close to each other, it starts to looking like, the story is too slow. It's just going and going, there's nothing happening. When you have all the time the gameplay elements, you start to lose purpose. You feel that you actually fucking forgot what this whole story was about. Because there's no reminder, right? There's nobody telling you, actually, you're doing it because there's a purpose. There's a goal that you are trying to reach. And now, let's try to analyze what those actually things mean and what happens actually through that graph, because that's probably the coolest thing, at least for me. So, first thing, what happens is when we see the fire, we actually anticipate that there is something that's going to happen, and it's probably bad, okay? We see the fire on the horizon, and I don't know if you guys remember, but one thing that we just did, we took care of the Gusler's goat, the princess, right? And the princess was there on purpose. The princess was there to distract you. The princess was there to make you not think about the story and about the character that Baron is. Because that thing is going to strike you way stronger now. Because you see the fire on the horizon and you're like, okay, I mean, there's some serious shit happening. So you go in, and then you see that the stables are burning. So then the hypothesis that you had, it's actually confirmed. You're like, oh, fuck, okay, I was right. Actually, it is happening. It's way worse than I wanted it to be. And about interpretation hypothesis, I will talk to you about in a second. This is a term that we use fairly often, analyzing the stories when we delve into these discussions. It's very important, especially in the non-linear stories, to know what that thing is. Now, as a player, I can, of course, do get into the stables and try to go through the fire. And this is something that we call encounter action. So this is a moment when we show, okay, Geralt, there is an evil happening. And as a player, I'm like, okay, I want to battle the evil, whatever the evil is. And then when I start doing this, I actually get engaged, and then I get involved, and then I start to care. And then it starts to be important for me. Because I try to fight. I try to actually make it better, right? And then, at the moment when I get to the Baron, I beat the shit out of him because I want to have a revenge. Because what he did was not right. He started burning those stables. So then, I have a moment of my revenge when I put his face into the crib, and the tension is released. But then, what happens is Baron tells you that this whole thing actually happened to him, and he turns out to be a pretty poor character. And then you feel guilty, because we made you feel guilty. Because what you did, you saw something bad that he did, then you beat the shit out of him, and you felt that you're feeling revenge, but then when he told you everything, with bruises on his face, with blood, you know that, okay, those were my fists that did it to him, and he's actually a very sad guy. So we actually want you to feel like this. And this is a moment when actually the emotions start kicking in. You start feeling. And this is a moment when actually the story is real. Okay, guys. Then we decided to go for the journey with Baron. And then our involvement increased because we're like, okay, I can actually do even more to make it, to help this poor guy, right? I can actually fix the thing that he fucked up. So we decide, okay, let's go together. And then we have a moment of success. Okay, we managed to dig out the botchling. We managed to find it, rather. Now, one of the important things is that I marked here on a slide for you is the partial success. This is something to encourage the player that he actually matters. So when I do my actions, they actually give a success. I can actually do something. My actions matter. I change the story a bit. So then I start believing I can, in fact, do something to fix the situation. Right? And this is important to actually give this partial success. This is something that happens fairly often in the noir types of stories. The character that is in the noir story, everything that happens to him is worse and worse and worse. But he keeps fighting because he thinks that he can actually make it better, that the situation can be better. So this is basically the analysis of this situation. And now I will jump forward to the next one. So that I can tell you a bit more about another methods that we are using. So this is a situation when we manage to dig out the botchling, right? And we are moving on. So first thing that happens is Baron takes him to his hands, and he moves on for the peregrination. And why peregrination? Why I use this word? Because for me, it was a moment when he actually decides, okay, I want to redeem myself. I'm actually, it's going, to the Christianity thing a bit. It's more like, I'm trying to redeem myself. I've broken my whole life. I'm trying to fix the situation. So he takes the botchling into his hands, and then he starts going. And we there, as a Witcher, are there to help him. Then there are the raids that are happening along the way. The botchling tries to break out. Then the peregrination continues. He tries to break out again. And the more raids appear. Then the peregrination continues until we reach the moment of the burial. So let's try to, one important element that I forgot. Of course, during that, you all the time have this other path that can happen. Basically, if you don't do fast enough with the botchling, it can actually shift, get swollen and huge one, and you would have to slaughter him, and then the quest goes completely different ways. But this is not a story that I would like to talk to you about, because that would be way too complex. I'm just marking it here so that you see it on the graph. And this all leads to the blood ritual, as I mentioned, with the Guslar. So, let's put this whole thing into the pacing graph that I mentioned. So first thing is we start the peregrination. So after the cutscene, when we found the botchling, we have the moment, okay, let's move on. So the first raids appear, and I know, okay, well, so this is not gonna be just a calm moment when we just walk around. There are actually combat happening around, but I managed to defeat them and then we move on. So, but there are other guys appearing, and they're actually harder on a gameplay level. So it's harder to beat them, there is more of them. And then it happens again, I managed to beat them, but then they appear again, it's more of them, and it's more difficult. And then there's a moment of this release of the tension, because we managed to get to the burial. Now, let's add the other path, and let's look into what actually those things are in terms of the structure. So you will see that there is, again, this rhythm kept here, right? There's a gameplay, and there is a story, and there is a gameplay, and there is a story, and there is a combat happening. And in our non-gameplay elements, we always use it, right? I don't know if you remember, but while Geralt is walking with Baron, they actually talk about the story all the time. They talk about the kid's name, right? There is an important stuff that happens along the way. So this is not just something to be there. And now, let's analyze the elements, because this is something that is really interesting. So at first, as a player, I anticipate that there's gonna be something bad that will happen. And I pretty much know it, right? Because I'm an experienced player. I know that they won't allow me to pick him up to do this on gameplay if there won't be anything bad happening. So then, there are the first raids that appear, and my hypothesis of me actually expecting that there is something bad going on is confirmed. And then it happens again, but my involvement increases, right? And you see that this structure is actually repeated 3 times. And it has a certain beauty and a certain purpose to it. First of all, we want the player to feel the tension to make his involvement stronger, right? I'm battling the things, and I'm getting further and further. They are getting stronger, but I'm managing to defeat it, and we are farther and farther away. And this whole thing is a build-up for the burial. And the burial, for very often, causes actually the huge tension release for that moment, and a lot of people cry at that moment. And there's one thing I want to tell you about now regarding this. I don't know if you use this method, I just love it. It's basically watching YouTubers when they play my stuff. And all the time when they play my quests, I ask myself, do they feel, do they think what I wanted them to feel and think? I always ask them, look basically how they're actually receiving the content that we prepared. If they're commenting in an exact way as I wanted them to do. Because basically, if this is built right, at some point, you will get to exactly the point that you wanted them to be. And at the moment of the burial, we wanted them to cry. And our cutscene team did an amazing job with preparing the scene. Karolina Stachera did a really awesome job on the dialogues there so that the characters are shown correctly. And you know, there's a lot of people crying, and I just love it. I just honestly love it. I live for the moments when people cry because of my quests. Because this is amazing. We do this to evoke emotions, right? And the strongest the game talks to you, the strongest the moment when there are emotions. Believe me. Okay, guys. So, now we'll switch to another quest, to something that is completely different, so that I won't tire you that much. And we'll switch to something that is in the form of a romance. We'll talk about the Last Wish. So this was the romance quest with Yennefer. So what we wanted to do with it? Well, first of all, we wanted to give a player space to basically develop their relationship to Yennefer. Next thing was, we wanted to reference the short story. That was an idea that came out from our story department, to basically reference the story team, the short story from Andrzej Sapkowski as much as we can at that point. Next thing was, we wanted to actually show a bit of vulnerable side of Yennefer. What was important for us was that she was not a character that would just sit with Geralt, sipping wine, and just, crying and talking about her love to him, and back and forth. You obviously feel that this is completely fake, right? Some characters just need certain conditions for them to work. And Yennefer, she was that kind of character. And we knew it, so we were looking for a space, a place that we could show actually that she is vulnerable, and that there is something that she would like to do to basically test the romance with Geralt, test the feeling that she has towards Geralt, if it's real. Other thing was, and that was something that I really always try to do, which was basically to have a gameplay that has all kinds of romantic connotations. And I will talk to you about in a second what those were. Other thing was, and that's almost standard for us, which was basically the story of the mature people. Because that happens in games a lot of times, and I know you guys know it, that, stuff on screen is completely fake, and you feel it in the dialogues, in the acting, like basically in the voiceover, like the lines are written in a way that the actor is not even able to perform it in a believable way, right? So, and that happens in games, unfortunately, a lot. So we really wanted not to have it, okay? Now, let's analyze the fragment of the quest that I wanted to talk to you about. So first what happens is we get to the boat with Yennefer, we start sailing with her, and then we get to the place when there's this gigantic crater, right? In the bottom of the ocean. We find a piece of the seal, and Yennefer manages to teleport us to the bottom of to the top of the mountain when we have a very honest talk, like a first moment with her. Then we do the investigation on the ship, what leads us to the fight with Jin, and at the end, there is a moment when we can do the confession and basically set our relationship with Yennefer at some way. So when we will put it all on the pacing graph, you will see that the structure looks kind of like this. So we start sailing, and we see, okay, stuff is happening, it's nice, we get to the crater, but before we get there, actually, there is 3 times when this whole structure is repeating, right? You get to first area, you investigate it, you check some stuff, then you get to the second place, then you get to the third place. So once again, the number 3, it's a magical number, because number 4 feels always a bit too much, maybe number 5 feels too much, number 2 is always too low. Yeah, that was a weird joke. So guys, now I want to talk to you about the romantic connotations, what I meant by that. Imagine, you're sitting with a woman that you may love or not, but you're sitting with a woman, or you're a woman and sitting with a guy on a boat, and you're sailing, and there's a moon there, right, shining over the sea. And there are whales, and there are waves, and there's fish, and there's nice music playing. And basically, I want, as a designer, to get you slowly to the mood of romance. I want you to feel, wow, it's so cool to be here with her. It's actually so nice. I really want this to continue. And they talk throughout the way. So those are the romantic connotations. Basically, I didn't implement there a combat with like bosses or who knows what, because I didn't want that, right? I wanted you to feel that, that's gonna be a romance quest. After the crater, we are teleported, so there is a moment, okay, we managed to get the thing, from the crater, and then we are teleported on the top of the mountain. And what happens now, there's a first story twist that happens in this quest. There's a moment when Yennefer tells us, okay, well, I need to tell you what this whole thing is about. So actually, she wants to break a curse or a spell that connects her and Geralt and Jin, and she wants to find the Jin or the Jin that did it to basically break this. She wants to check if the relationship, if something that is between them is real. So there is the first moment when she actually tells you, when there's already too late, of course, because you are teleported to the tallest mountain, so this is totally her style. She teleports you there, and they talk. Afterwards, we decide, okay, let's investigate the ship. We see that there's something really wrong going on. The ship is cut in half. There's blood everywhere. We investigate the clues. We find the seal, and Yennefer manages to actually summon the Jinn. And afterwards, we fight him, and then there is the moment of confession. So I will now analyze the elements with you, actually what happens along the way. So guys, as you see, there is, again, a certain rhythm to it. So basically, the elements are actually happening one after another in a way that there is not too much of the same happening. And then let's analyze the elements of that. So first is that something that I mentioned to you is all those romantic connotations. The second thing is building of the intimacy. And I don't know if you remember, but there are certain things that I did consciously to actually build the intimacy. There is a moment when Yennefer says, I will cast a spell, and you will be able to hear me in your head. So you are actually talking to her, having her voice in your head, and she hears your voice. And you are just talking without using words. But you're underwater, so you're extremely lonely. You're just alone there. And she's the only person that you have connection to. And you talk. right? Not every player will feel it like that, but there are players that will. And I know that there are players that actually felt it like this. So that was really intentional. And the moment when you reach the crater, Yennefer says, I'll cast a spell and I will see through your eyes. And then actually we get even deeper into this, right? She starts seeing the same as Geralt. And what I wanted to do as a designer, in your head, I want to make you feel and think, okay, actually we're really close. We're actually really close together. Of course, there are players that won't think this, but we can say it about pretty much everything. Okay, guys. Then there is a trick that we very often use in the city project, but you can also see it in the movies a lot. It's basically a change of a scenery. It's a really old trick, and it's fairly simple. When you, as a designer, you have a big scene, and you can't really change, figure out, okay, how to make it shorter, on how to do this. We basically change the scenery. Here, we do the teleportation. So you are on the boat, and you're suddenly on the top of the mountain. Everything is different. And despite the fact that the scene is, still the same, it's fairly written by our writers, but basically the fact that we change the scenery completely, it makes you perceive the scene because there's something fresh. There's something new that happened. And if you look into our quests, there's actually a lot of times when we do this because, sometimes dialogue has to be long to have the weight. Okay, now the moment when the honest talk happens, there is the story twist, which I mentioned to you, so I won't talk about that more. The involvement increase moment when we are there, we start doing the investigation, right? So you see that the purpose of this whole investigation there is actually a moment of the player to think, okay, I actually want to help her, right? She asked me during the talk with me, I actually want to help her. And then there's something important that happens, which is like the djinn appears. So some of you are probably in relationships, some of you are probably in more relationships in the same time that you should be. As you probably know, the strongest feelings in a relationship happens when you together conquer something on your way, right? When you defeat an obstacle. And this is an obstacle for them, right? There is a boss, and obviously it has a gameplay purpose, right? We fight, we kill shit, it's cool. But for the story purpose, we actually want them to fight together, right? Yennefer screams during that time. Of course, she doesn't have that big of a role because Geralt is still the one that has to slay the beast. But they are there together. And afterwards, there's the moment when I can actually set my relationship with her. And there's this beautiful scene when they take down the seat and they look for the vista of Skellige. And I don't know if you realized, but this is the only ship on the Skellige that actually has this side of the ship cut out in a way that they have a nice place to sit there. Because we obviously did it intentionally, right? We prepared the whole ship in a way that they would be able to sit there, that they would be able to look towards the horizon. Because this is basically a good atmosphere for the romance quest. So, as you can see here, in contrary to the Baron, it's actually completely different, right? Things we do when you want to build a romance are totally different. What you do when you want to do a quest, when there is a Witcher trying to undo the curse. Okay, guys, so let's change again. I think I need to speed up, actually, because I'm always too slow. So we are going now to the Battle of Kaer Morhen. And I don't know, you may have read it, in some articles. This was probably the hardest quest I did in my life when I'm working on quests. It was insane. There was insane number of connections and number of facts to check and number of variables to take into account. So that was really difficult, probably the most complex we could come up with at that time. So what we wanted to do here, we wanted to show that you're facing an undefeated enemy. We wanted to present the generals of Wild Hunt in a correct way, right? So we wanted to show them as powerful, as important. We wanted to prepare a separate scenes for them, so there is basically a moment for them to shine. Now, the other thing is, that was extremely important for me, is the value of friends, of allies, and to show the not typical synergies between them. And this is a fairly old trick, right? Used in movies a lot of times. You can see it done really well in the first Avengers. There's a moment when you put the Tony Stark and you put Bruce Banner in the same room, right? They are both scientists, right? There is a lot of things they can relate to each other, but still they're extremely different, right? And those differences are actually shining. And one thing I really wanted to do here is I wanted to give the player these moments when he's like, wow, this is so I was not expecting this, actually, that I will have these two characters, this thing will happen. Like moment, for instance, when there is a Kaer and Kaer Metz and Lambert, which I don't want to spoil completely. And one additional thing I wanted to do is I wanted really this quest to be really tiring for the player. And that had a purpose. And it has a special, it has a certain pacing to it, because I wanted you to be fucking tired at the end when there's a last cutscene that hits you really hard so that you will cry. Because this is what I do. Okay, guys. So let's analyze the thing that happens. We will analyze the first moment. So there is a moment when the Wild Hand approaches. There's a cool cutscene showing them, and then we together with Leto and Lambert, if you of course have a Leto, we are going towards the forest when there are portals. We are trying to defeat Wild Hand like that. We close the portals, and there's no sign from Triss. And she was supposed to cast a meteors on the forest. So we know there's something wrong going on. So we switch to Ciri, trying to save Triss. We go to Triss. Triss manages to actually cast down the meteors. And then we switch back to Witchers that are fighting with the Wild Hunt. They look great while doing this, because that's what's important. And then we come back to the Kaer Morhen on horses. So this is a events that I wanted to analyze with you. So you will see here that the tension here will be actually kind of strong, because we start really at the beginning. Okay, there is danger happening, but there at the very beginning I decide, okay, let's, relieve. There's nothing really that bad happening yet. They are in the forest. They didn't reach yet the Kaer Morhen, so let's slowly go towards them, right? So the tension is released. But then at the moment when we realize there's no sign from Triss, it's the instant bump. And the moment when we get to the shoes of Ciri and try to help Triss, and we manage to help Triss, there's this moment of the peak, and then suddenly it goes down. Okay, we managed to do that, but then it actually, at the moment when we see, okay, there are Witchers fighting, there's fire going down, then we get on horses, and then we have this, then we have gameplay when we come back. So if you see this, it actually has structure like that. Structure here is slightly more complex than the graph shows, because it would be actually a bit too complicated to put it on one slide, and it would be too cluttered for you to talk about. But it roughly looks like that. And there's something that is extremely specific here. You will see that this graph is actually completely different to the graphs if you have, for instance, a romance quest. Because basically, the moment that is the highest and the moment that is the lowest, they're actually much more far away from each other than in the quests that actually have a way smoother storytelling. And this actually, if the graph is looking like this for the whole quest, and in the battle it is actually, because I really tried hard, so it's basically going up and down all the time. You actually slowly get tired. You actually slowly feel, okay, this is really difficult. The whole battle is starting to be really difficult, so that, the moment when that happens at the end, you feel it. So then, let's analyze what those things mean. So at first, we basically introduce our enemy, right? We just need a good entrée for the enemy, as you probably know. All the movies and most of the games do this, and that's super important. And then as a player, I do the counteraction, right? This is something I've shown you in the Baron story. We are trying to basically fight against them. But then, when we realize, oh shit, actually Triss gives us no sign what's going on, then the tension is increased, right? And a matter of the small success again, right? I mentioned to you during talking about Botchlink, it's again here, right? I managed to do something, so my involvement is increasing, because I know I matter as a player. I can actually do something in this story. And now, we slowly move towards Kaer Morhen. There is a presentation of danger, right? We show basically Witchers fighting Wild Hunt. If you have Leto, he has an awesome scene there, also set up for him. And we manage to get out from there, and we go towards the Kaer Morhen on horses, while the meteorites are falling down. Okay. So now we'll switch to the Hearts of the Stone, and we'll move on to the fourth story. This will be the quest that I did, which is called Dead Man's Party, so the wedding quest that you guys probably know if you played the game, obviously. What I wanted to do there, that was supposed to be a very traditional wedding, right? And we wanted to find a roots for the for the story as much as we could. The story team did a tremendous job there, especially on the dialogues, like digging in and finding all those elements. And the idea actually for the wedding, to use the wedding as a motive there, came from the story team. Now, the next thing is what I wanted to do. I wanted to show a grain of happiness, because if you guys know the story structure for our first expansion, it's really sad, right? The story is really sad, what's going on there. So I knew, okay, we're going to hit the player hard. So this time, I need to be the good guy. This time, I need to give player a bit more of relief, a bit more of happiness, so that he can, have the relief, so that basically he will suffer more when the bad things happen. So one additional thing we wanted to do here, we had this idea of this atypical hero, which was Vladimir, Witold in Polish. He was basically this ghost that was entering Geralt's body, leaving it and getting in and out. We wanted to show new face of Geralt, to basically have fun. To basically have fun of Geralt. There was always this talks in our company, okay, how to make Geralt actually do those ridiculous things, Does he have to, he's a witcher, that doesn't fit his character? Well, we figured out the way how to make him do this, right? We introduced Witold. And this was one important thing that I really wanted to do, which was Shani. So coming back to the Witcher 1 romance, picking up something that we didn't really ever picked up on from the Witcher 1. I'm really a big fan of Shani. So we really wanted to have her there. And working with the story team, we managed to incorporate her a lot actually in the quests. So let's look into the structure that I want to talk to you about. First, as Geralt, having Witold inside him, he walks around with Shani, and then we approach the fence there, and we see that the peasants are playing some kind of weird wedding game, and it turns out it's all about the herding pigs. So obviously Witold wants to do this, so we can get there, and we can win the fluffy pig for Shani. So I'm slowly starting to blinking towards the player that maybe there will be a romance with Shani. And then, of course, Witold being Witold, he does what he's not supposed to do, so he starts hitting on a farm girl. And then, as on every good Polish wedding, the dudes appear and we start beating shit off each other with the planks, which all ends up with our honest talk with Shani. So let's see how the graph looks here. So we have the peasants, right? We are slightly interested, okay, what's going on here? There is some actual gameplay going on, so we heard those pigs, run around after them with some funny dialogues. We win the fluffy pig, so the tension is released, but then, of course, Witold was not supposed to do this, so we are a bit pissed on him, and then the actual combat starts, but then there is a small relief. So what you see here is that, first of all, this is a comedy quest, right? This is not a romance, this is not an action quest, this is not horror or thriller, this is actually a comedy. And what happens here? You actually have way more scenes and way more dialogue than in quests of other types. It's also caused by the fact that we don't really, in the Witcher game, had enough methods to basically tell the story like that through gameplay. So that's why basically the structure always has a bit more scenes and it's a bit more story heavy. Then the herding pigs moments and the fight are the moments when you have this breakthrough. And what's important here, you can see that still, no matter that the quest is really story heavy and there's a lot of elements that make it more passive, so I'm just watching basically and picking choices in the dialogue, there's still this certain rhythm to it, right? Between scenes, there are events happening despite the fact that it's all, it's just joking mostly and building the characters, but still the rhythm is kept there. And let's see how it works here. So first we have this anticipation, okay? We're like, what is going on? We start to question what actually, the designers or the game has for us. And then our hypothesis is confirmed. And here I wanted to talk to you about the interpretation hypothesis. This is an incredibly important tool for the designers. This is basically something that makes me as a designer know that what player thinks. And guys, if you have a story that is basically a story when I follow the clues and I analyze them and I think, okay, yeah, maybe this guy killed, and Geralt says it, I want you as a player think certain things, right? I want you to have an interpretation hypothesis. Okay, so I guess that that this guy killed him, Or I want, that the maid who brought the coffee and it was poisoned. I think that was the maid who did it, right? So basically the interpretation hypothesis is the moment when you, at the moment of the story, control, as a designer, what actually gamer is thinking, right? What his level of knowledge is at the given moment. And now we move on. So there is basically a bit of development of the romance. We want the fluffy pig. By the way, I don't know if you guys realize, but Shani does all kinds of things with this pig. She's sleeping with her. So if you go to her flat, she actually has the pig with her in the bed. And then later, actually, when she's moving on, she packs her to her luggage, because that was important for me, that she packs, the fluffy pig that she wants from me. I thought that, that was something that shows that the character is real, even that small details. And then, we have basically this small partial success, but then, of course, there's a twist. Then we have a fight. And what's important, actually, even in the quest like this, right? Even in the quest that is actually a comedy quest, you just need to change a pace a bit, right? You just need to change an atmosphere a bit. And from my experience, it is like that player is actually able to sustain a quest that is a horror-like quest or a thriller way longer than actually a comedy quest. This is really something that was not that obvious for me when I started working as a quest designer, but then I learned in time. And also, the comedy and the comedy quests and comedy stories in general are actually probably harder to make than other types. But also, of course, is connected with your personal preferences and your skills. And at the end, we basically have this talk with Shani, where the tension is released. When she also mentions, that she likes some things that Witold was doing, and Geralt can be a bit surprised about that. Okay, guys, and let's move on to the last one. This is a quest from the Blood and Wine. And this is a quest called La Cage aux Fous. This is a reference to one of the musicals. Props if you guys know it. In Polish, it was called Pogłos. Now, what I really wanted to do there, I wanted to do a typical Witcher dark story in Beauclair. Because we knew at the very beginning that Beauclair is going to be a very nice place. It's going to be a place full of color, a place full of happy people. So I knew that I need to come in and, break it. That's why we knew that we need to, at some point, introduce a very typical, traditional Witcher type of story, a dark one, right? And that's why, I went back to the roots and asked myself, okay, what is actually the most typical of the Witcher stories? Where it's a curse. But I really didn't want this curse to be a typical one, because I honestly really don't like cliches that much. So I thought, okay, let's go towards like grotesque and fear there, and introduce this thing that we have this disgusting ritual that Geralt has to go through, and it's basically that he is, having a dinner. He's having a dinner with a monster, and he has to do it in a very specific way to actually break the curse. And then there was one of the interesting things that I really wanted to do, which was basically loop back the story towards Mr. Mirror. He appears there, but in a more like of a ghost. Behind the story, you can hear his music playing at some moments. And if you will delve into the story really deep and understand everything that happens there, you will actually see that why and how the Mr. Mirror works there. Okay, guys, so let's look into one of the things that I wanted to analyze with you. This will be basically probably the coolest moment of the quest, which is basically a diner with the monster. So Regis tells us that we need to go to the White's Manor, to the Spoon Collector's Manor. We start doing our investigation, and throughout that, we reach to the moment when the White appears. We sit together with him or her, and we have a dinner. And then basically through that dinner, we can actually attack the White. We can make him scared because we screwed up while doing the curse. That always results in tracking him down. Obviously, it's a bit differently done. But this path results with us actually killing the monster. But then we can actually lift the curse, what normally leads us to the tracking down the White that is basically scared, but this tracking down looks a bit different than in other cases. And then we find out the character that was actually hiding inside the White. So guys, let's look into the structure that we have. So basically, if you put it on a graph, it looks roughly like this, right? Regis tells us about the White's manor, we get to it, we do the investigation, and then the tension is slowly rising, right? This ugly fucking monster appears with the spoons over him, so it's just looks creepy as hell. We sit together with him, and we have no idea what's gonna happen, and then we may actually decide, okay, let's go into battle and just let's kill this shit before it lays eggs. But we can decide, okay, well, maybe actually let's try to, undo the curse, but then we screw up. Well, the White is scared, it runs off, but the tension, if you see, actually acts around like this. And this is how it looks like. But then, if we try to undo the curse, actually you will see that the tension there is released, right? Because the White is scared, he runs off. But we, as a player, we kind of feel, okay, we probably did well, and the tension is completely different here. So what's important to see in this example is that if you're doing a non-linear storytelling, actually, your pacing graph is completely different in the places when there are choices, and especially when the choices are important. And because of that, also all your interpretation hypothesis for the player is going to be different. And this is where the place really, when the story really gets complex. So let's go through all the bulbs and analyze it a bit. First, what we have basically anticipation of the EView. We hear from Regis, okay, there's this spoon collector thing happening there, in the manor. So we expect, okay, there's gonna probably something bad happening. We get to the manor and we see all those spoons around. And as a designer, I'm telling the player, you're right, actually, there is this spoon collector there leaving, and your hypothesis was correct. Right? Then we sit together on a dinner, so tension increases a bit. And then basically we can actually, decide, okay, let's fucking do the revenge. And I decided to actually implement that because we always think about the player and the player's orientation. And it's more like, as a player, I may feel, that's just a monster, and I'm a witcher. I'm supposed to kill monsters, so, I'm taking out my sword and killing this fucking beast, right? So that's why this thing is there, because it's important, because player may feel like this. And then he's actually role-playing, because the whole story feels natural to him. Because it feels, okay, the designer allowed me to actually do what I would like to do as my character. And often when you don't do this, and when you don't allow the player to do this, there is the moment of immersion break. Player feels, okay, really the game doesn't allow me to be what I want, right? And the game sucks. I don't want to play this game anymore. Okay, guys. And then we track down the Vict, so our involvement increased. This is pretty typical. We already talked about it. And there is a moment when we actually do the counteraction. We fight the White. We prepared it in a pretty cool way. I don't want to spoil it for you, but there are spoons involved in the whole thing. Now, the moment when we actually undo the curse, the tension releases, right? As a designer, you always have to think about it. Like, what is actually my player at this exact moment thinking and feeling, right? Because those two things are super important. That the player at this moment is actually, feeling, okay, I probably did well, right? The tension is gone. Now I'm just tracking it. And there is, of course, a moment of questioning, okay, what actually happened to this person? Is this person alive? Like, did it change to something else? Will I find it? But the tension is nowhere close to basically fighting the monster. And that leads us, guys, to the takeaway, to the last slide. God damn it, that was long. I will try to give you something so that you can remember, to sum it up for you. So first thing is, basically, you have a completely different pacing graph depending on the quest type. And if you will play a lot of games, especially story games, you will see this. If you will start writing it down on a piece of paper and basically see how the story goes, development, along with the graph development, you will see that sometimes it's wrong. You will see and you will feel something's not right in the story. Well, the fact that it's not right is that there's something wrong in the pacing of the graph, basically, and you will feel it really easily, right? If you will, of course, start training, analyzing that. Next thing is basically remember that the events that are happening on the graph actually matter. So they matter because player has a completely different perspective to what is actually happening on the screen. Like, it matters if I talk to the guy or if I fight him, right? So this actually changes my perspective. Now, what's important is that in non-linear stories, the whole pacing depends on the choices. And you saw it in the example of the White, right? The moment when I decided to undo the curse, the pacing graph actually changed. And as a designer of the non-linear stories, you need to think about it. Because the player might have experienced just a moment ago, like this tip at the moment of the fight, and he's just tired. So you should probably not give him another fight and so on, because you will tire him too much. Or he might have actually tracked down the monster, right? So you need to pace it correctly and think about all the possible situations. The next thing is the interpretation hypothesis, right? The thing that I tried to explain. It changes during the quest. Remember, this is like writing a story that is a mystery story, and all good writers tend to repeat this one thing, which is like the story keeps being interesting for the player till the moment he figures it out. So player is interested because there are next clues, and he's like asking himself, okay, what that's gonna be? And of course, if there's a conscious player, so that's actually, trying to delve into the story, you have a lot of the hypotheses, and it will change often. So just remember and try to control it. And one of the last things is that the hypothesis is completely different and can be completely different actually in the moments when you have choices and when the story branches. And that is it, guys.
2 minutes for questions, I think, because we're out of time, but 2 minutes for questions. We can have like 2 questions maybe from the audience. Yes, please.
Yeah.
I hope it's not too broad and complicated, but how do you avoid making cliché quests? Like, what are the things you have to keep in mind to not spoil the mood with cliché?
Oh, well, I mean, this is this is really difficult, and as you guys probably know, we are not really the best in that because it still happens from time to time, obviously even to us. There's 2 ways how you can do what you can do with the cliché. So one way is basically, let's say, the Tarantino style. So you take the cliché, but you do it very consciously. So there's a dude walking into the bar. Everybody knows and saw that kind of scenes thousands of times, right? So just be conscious that you are using the cliché and you use it, right? Like, if you want to do this, the scene that, he approaches the bar and puts a gun on the bar, do it in a way that he approaches the gun and puts a water gun, and you see it's plastic. And, because you used the cliché on your advantage. So that's one way, right? So this is a good use of the cliché. And second use of the cliché is not to use the cliché. So basically, this always comes to basically the development of the team, and basically to the knowledge. But the way how we work in most cases is like, okay, we have a problem that is a story issue. So in most cases, the story team and the quest team work on it together. Sometimes a bit of back and forth, but usually together. And what we do, we write down ideas, and the most ideas that come first, we cross them out and we don't use them. Because those are the cliches. Those are the first things that come to mind. So basically, if you analyze your story and you're like, okay, I need a solution. Okay, well, let's make it that player needs a key to get into the building. Well, okay, so you cross it out, put it away, and then you look for another one. And you keep on doing this until you feel, okay, I'm pretty far away from solutions that were very often used. And then when you do, well, you test it on your peers. So you basically ask other designers, okay, how you feel about this, right? Part of our process is that designers in the quest team, they actually play quests of each other. This is part of our normal pipeline, and they're basically obliged to play it and give the feedback so that other designers can see it, and then they can use it and basically rework their stuff. And we just rework all the time. Like, our production is just changing shit back and forth all the time, because this is only way of actually getting high quality. Like, I really don't know the case of people hitting 100% high quality all the time with the first idea they have. It happens, because I saw it, but it's fairly rare, and happens very rarely, and it's usually not connected to talent, honestly speaking. Like, it's more luck than talent. Like, talent is when you actually can sit down, no matter how deep shit you are in, you can figure out how to actually get out of it. And that's really my answer to this. It was not really short, I guess. Sorry.
Last question, okay? Because we still like 2 minutes.
I actually love questions, by the way.
Thank you for the presentation. My question would be, how do you treat taking control away from the player? And when you're building these blocks and this tension graph, are there any particular rules in not to overuse cinematics and basically stuff that gets you out of the game? And is the story king in that respect? That if the story is interesting, we can sacrifice this taking away of control.
Okay, so there are some rules that we set up for ourselves for situations like this, and I guess the first rule would be it has to feel fairly natural. So let's say if the cinematic want to do the same as Geralt would do at that situation, this is okay, right? If the cinematic would do something that is completely different and actually goes against the role-playing of my character, this is wrong. So this is the division that we use basically to find out, are we using it wrong or right? And the best way actually for us to test it is the one-liners of Geralt. And I don't know if you guys realize that. I actually had that moments a lot. I saw it on YouTube multiple times. When YouTuber plays something, and then, there's a monster that appears and so on, and Geralt comments like, what the fuck was that? And then YouTuber says it exactly same moment. This means that the game is really well done. Because it means that actually the player had a comment that was expressed by the character almost one-to-one. It means that actually we knew and we controlled basically the story to such an extent that we knew what player is thinking, what player is feeling, and he had enough control basically. He was exactly with character all the time. So this is a very good thing, like when our QA plays our quests and they say, yeah, I would like to do this, or why Geralt doesn't say something, we instantly know they're right. They're in most cases right. Because they are there with the character and we just didn't see something, right? And this is the moments when we adjust a lot. So those are the moments when we try to test if we're there in the character. And then in the pacing graph, you very often see if there's too many cinematics. Basically, if you see, okay, there's one cinematic, there's another one, and even worse, throughout one of them, character does something that looks like should be dependent of the player's choice, but it's not. It means we need to change it. And it's just, I know we did it in the past few times when we couldn't, because it would like break the story in such a way that we can't allow it, or it's just production-wise, it's simply impossible to even create the story that would cover all those cases. So it has to be a juggle, right? You have to basically give the player enough agency, enough control over his character, so that he doesn't question your decisions, right? So there is this trust, I trust you as a player, but I trust you just a little. Screw up and I won't trust you, basically. And this is always like this, right? So always when we do it right, the player feels, okay, I still trust you. So this is, I guess, the best answer I can give you.
Thank you very much.